I have a newfound respect for Brian Beck's ability to manage doing this podcast while also pushing all the music buttons and video buttons. And I feel terrible about all the things I used to think about him.
Jared, are you quitting? Is that what you're saying?
I'm quitting this part of the job. Brian does an amazing job, obviously, both doing the podcast and pushing buttons, which I am incapable of.
Well, let's leave it at the button thing for now.
All right. So he when he comes back from vacation, we'll ease him back into this by just having him push the buttons. And then I can just focus on speaking.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
So maybe I should introduce ourselves. I'm Jared Blank with Master B2B alongside Andy Hoar. Welcome.
Yeah, good to be here. Like I said, it's usually Brian, but it's been a nice vacation for Brian. It's been a good vacation from Brian too. So
absence makes the heart grow fonder. That is what they say. And certainly I found that to be true. I think more interestingly will be when we ask Brian how he felt about us while he was gone.
True. Well, but he's in Europe having fun while we are here. So I'm in Chicago. So last week we had the first part of the apocalypse. We had the great earthquake of Evanston earthquake of 2026. And then a week later, we have this. So for those of you who can't see the screen, we have an air quality index that is literally, the little arrow is off the chart on hazardous. And there's a picture here of downtown Chicago. And the thing that's notable about it is you can't see Chicago. So they won't let us go outside. We're supposed to be wearing N95 masks. This is ridiculous. So earthquake last week, smog, essentially LA smog this week. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but Brian will be back for that.
Mother Nature is quite angry with Chicago. I'm not sure why that is. My memories of Chicago this time of year is going to Taste of Chicago, which I believe was last week. And in my memory, every time I ever went, it was 35,000 degrees. I'm not sure if it's still like that.
Yeah, it's pretty much still true.
Perfect. So maybe this is actually just from the barbecuing that went on at Taste of Chicago. Maybe
that's right. Or the fireworks from the World Cup that just drifted all the way over to Chicago by now.
Yes. So what do we got going on today in the breaking news? No, that didn't work. Oh, I see. Hold on. We got to try that again, Brian. There we go.
Well, we've been talking about tokens and the cost of tokens for several weeks now. In fact, we did a whole podcast and we did 2 podcasts on this. And what's interesting is in the last week, there's been a new development. And for those of you who can't see the screen, there's an AI-generated image of what we call the AI pricing, or AI token pricing wars. And what happened was, there are a couple of big players like OpenAI, of course, Google has Gemini, Anthropic has Claude, and Meta. So Meta's always been kind of bringing up the rear. They spent hundreds of billions of dollars bringing all the best talent in. They had this whole bidding war for these PhDs. There's like 10 guys in the world who work for all these companies and do all the AI. Well, Mark Zuckerberg, flew private jets, wined and dined all these guys, got them to come on board. And a year later, where's Meta? Still behind. And so now they've resorted to what all companies do when they're losing, which is what, Jared? Cut the price.
You got to cut prices, always.
So they cut prices by a whopping 75%. So their version of Claude, basically their developer platform, is now just 25% of the price of Claude and OpenAI and all the rest. And so one or two things is going to happen here, and I'm interested in your thoughts on it. One is either they're going to capture this budget-sensitive developer group that really wants to save money, or they're going to embarrass themselves. Which do you think it's going to be?
So history would suggest the latter. Though I'm curious, because this is a bit of the world that I don't know about. You would normally cut costs if gaining market share would put you in a position to make you profitable in some way. I'm curious, in Meta's business, let's say this works. Let's say developers shift off of Anthropic and OpenAI and move over to Meta's platform. Does that benefit Meta? Is it big enough to impact their unbelievably massive advertising business? Are they doing this because the advertising business is on shakier ground than we realize? I'm not entirely sure why you would cut prices like this for a business like Meta's.
Or there's the third possibility, and it's ironic, but is it about ego? Because Meta's got nobody using their platform. In fact, I think I read last week that they're going to make compute power available. Who's got compute power at this point? So apparently they have resources, they overbought, and they're going to see what they can do here. My sense is that there is actually a market for cheaper tokens. So there's stories, we've talked about them here, where people spent, one guy spent like $500 million in 1 month on Claude tokens. So there are people who were encouraged to use AI everywhere, and they did. And it cost those companies a lot of money. Now they're all pulling back on the use of AI. After I told everybody to, run forward, they're telling everybody to stop and turn around and come back. But there's some things that have netted out of this, which is people want to continue using these things. But if you're just uploading a PDF, that was one of the culprits here. If you're just like uploading a PDF to AI, it actually takes tokens to do that. Well, why can't those just be, let's call them cheap tokens? I'm reminded of, these days don't exist anymore, I don't think, but with cell phones where they had like nights and weekend minutes where they were cheaper if you could talk to your mom on the weekend or at nights. But during the day, stay away. So I think there could be night and weekend minutes associated with tokens here. And you might want to jump in on that.
Anthropic has done that. They've come along the way here in the past few months. Every once in a while, I'll get on Claude Code, I'll get a notice saying that if I wait till the weekends or evenings, that that much like when I used to call my grandmother at 11:01 p.m. on Sunday nights, you save a couple of pennies a minute. People were shifting their habits. I think the thing that the only real benefit I can imagine for them is something we've talked about in the past. As an incredibly well-funded company, they are cash rich and continue to be even more cash rich because they've raised money on the bond market. They can afford to cut costs. They will generate massive profits through the core advertising business, that they can afford to do this. And so why not? What's the worst that happens if they try this for 3 or 6 months and it just lowers costs for everybody? Or if it doesn't shift, they get out of this, it doesn't shift market share, they get out of this business. It feels like a very low risk opportunity for them to see if they can shift market share.
Yeah, and you could end up looking like the streaming wars, where it's a big land grab. Everybody's trying to grab what they can, and then when they lock in, they raise the price. I mean, how many times does Netflix raise the price? So I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to grab some early market share, grab some early land, hold on to it. Their competitive differentiation right now is the price of their token. If that works, they might make it work. I want to make one other quick point here. There's now the emergence of companies that are able to arbitrage tokens for you. And so I just bought a company called Open Router, which just raised $100 million in funding. And what they do is in real time, they select the model that has the cheapest token, essentially. So if you want to upload that spreadsheet and it's a cheap one, and it's at middle of the day and you don't want to spend a valuable token, Open Router will find you a cheap token on the open market. So now there's this going on as well, which leads me to believe that there's just a market for these tokens. You're going to pay a price to do certain things at certain times. And then some tokens are going to be worth more than others.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point, because even if you think about, or I think about the way that I use the different platforms, that I've found for myself that OpenAI or ChatGPT does a really decent job with creating images when I need to, in a way that I've struggled to get Claude to do what I want. And so I use ChatGPT for that. I use Claude for a bunch of other things. And so if there's a way for a tool to sort of push me in the right direction, both in terms of how good the tool will be able to, the platform will be able to be to accomplish my task at the right price, you can imagine that that is a business.
Well, ultimately, too, my final point on this is that ultimately this is all about ROI. Yeah. It isn't just about finding the cheapest token. In theory, it is. But at the end of the day, if that token, even if the expensive tokens are less expensive than paying a human, the ROI on that expensive token is still better than paying for a human. Of course, the ROI on the cheap token is going to be better, assuming you can do the same thing. So again, it's a market, it'll develop, but people really should focus on the ROI of token usage.
Yep. All right, what do we got next?
Okay, so the theme of this, which we had too much fun talking about tokens there, is go big or narrow or go home. And what do we mean by this? Well, it continues. This whole notion in B2B, it's not unique to B2B, but I think it's becoming more pronounced in B2B, that you either have to be really big or highly specialized, or you're probably going to lose. And so this past week, there were two interesting stories you want to highlight here. One is that Ferguson, the plumbing distributor, made a $1.6 billion flow control bet with a company called Flowworks. What does this mean? Well, they bought a company that will expand their TAM. I think what they wrote here was by $50 billion. So I guess that was a pretty good deal. If you spend $1.6 billion and you might be able to tap into 50 billion out of it. But, it just shows you that you can't continue to stay the same size. And then at the same time, affiliated distributors, a friend of the show, Caroline Ernst, who runs e-commerce there, they just bought yet another company, another one called Supply Force. They bought two more in the last year. And what they do is they service these independent, like MRO distributors, the ones who compete against Grainger, but they don't have Grainger size. They're like usually regional or specialized around a vertical. And affiliate distributors, because of their size, they just basically bring all these independents together and give the buying power of a collective, can have them compete-ish with the Graingers of the world. I'm not sure about the Amazons of the world, but they can create with the Graingers of the world. Well, there's a net good in that, isn't there? About being larger. The larger you get, the better the price you get, the economy of scale. So there's just a constant demand for these guys to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And no surprise, they are. But for years, people have talked about this. Can you be a regional distributor that's not necessarily specialized because you had an area that you were focused on? And I think just because of the fact that delivery is pretty much, you can do that overnight, you can deliver from adjacent states, I think that advantage has disappeared. But what do you think?
There is, I think my takeaway from the last 30 something years of the consumer internet is you can be small, you can be big, you cannot be in the middle. All of the middle disappeared over the last 30 years. In my time in B2C, we saw that everywhere. That what happened to Circuit City and what's happened to Macy's over the years and Bed Bath & Beyond and all of these sort of middle-sized businesses got squooshed by people who were going to focus a lot or people who were just going to go massive. And that is equally true in distribution, that everything is national nowadays. And the market also tends to reward scale. That is a bit cyclical, that there were a little bit before both of our times, back in the 70s, in the age of the conglomerate, where businesses were just gobbling up everything they could, whether they were related or not, because size was all that mattered. And then it was, oh no, you can't be a conglomerate. There's no synergies there. That makes no sense whatsoever. There's way more value. And something you've talked about before, there was value there because private equity or LBO shops back in the day would come and break it apart and create more value as broken up than they would as a whole. So we're in a place now, possibly because of how much funding PE firms have gotten, where there's enough capital in the market to buy up companies and scale things up, and then one day they will break them apart and sell them, and onward with capitalism.
Yeah, you know what? I think this is a good argument that there's something such as smart scale and dumb scale. And I've seen companies that engage in smart scale where they add adjacent categories, they get bigger and better in what they know. But I've also seen dumb scale, and I see a lot of that in B2B, if I'm being honest. You see with brand manufacturers where they manufacture one thing and then they find there's an adjacency, and so they add that to it. And then pretty soon, 20 years later, the last company they added to it almost competes with the first company they ever had. Yep. And at that point, you say to yourself, that's becoming dumb scale. They think we can leverage all this capability, but when you start competing with yourself, and I've literally seen this happen, there's something wrong. You can't be like 40 companies crammed into one. It just doesn't work. It's a bit lazy in a way too, because they think, oh, well, we've got the sales force in the next adjacent category. We can just add this to it. It doesn't work. Because what you were describing earlier, I was thinking, oh yeah, back in the 70s, what happened was the joke about consultants. You got to get big and big, big, and then you get big, like, okay, now divest, 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 divest.
Yes.
It's like, well, which is it? They make money in both directions, of course,
Well,
but
that's no, that's it. That the market will reward at different points, will reward different things. And I think the question, if I were a CEO of one of these companies, is do you continue with the vision that you have, or do you simply do what the market seems to be rewarding companies to do? And we are in a place now where the market is definitely rewarding size.
yeah, and I think that's not going to change. Like, when was the last time Amazon divested somebody? When was the last time Walmart divested something? I mean, you don't see that. Doesn't mean they're great at it or world class at everything, but there's enough holding that together that it's working. The question is for mid-market and small-ish B2B companies that are not tremendously specialized, can they survive? And I remember a famous story about a company called Akron Hardware, which was a competitor to like Home Depot back in the 70s and 80s. It was in Akron, Ohio. It was a small hardware store, basically. And they were getting their ass handed to them by, Home Depot and Lowe's. And they got smart and said, well, we need to specialize. So they went into the doorknob business, and they became, at least the US and perhaps the world's most successful doorknob distributor, and they were highly specialized. And actually, at the end of the day, I don't know, I haven't checked them on recently, but when they did that, they went from being an also ran and a company that was probably close to being put out of business by Home Depot and Lowe's to a large company that can now compete on its own terms. And again, that's capitalizing on the specialization thing. But in both cases, you have to scale, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's a brave move to scale down, to niche down, and to recognize that we are not in a position, because who doesn't think that they're brilliant and that their team is amazing and their workers are great and their customers love them? Everyone does. Unless you are in a acute heart failure situation where you just need to start breaking the pieces up and selling them like a Sears to keep the lights on. It's very rare for a CEO to make a bold move like that, to say, I see where the future is going in our industry, and we have to niche down. That maybe their great grandfather started the thing as a doorknob business. That there may be a reason where you see, oh, there is space for us here, and we can niche down to it. And maybe you spin that off. There's a lot of ways to go, but I think it is the confidence, and it is a rare CEO that's willing to make a bold move ahead of the market, smashing it in the face with the fact that they're going to have to make that.
Yeah, and I think the last point in this one is it's, back to our point about a diversified offering that gets you scale, at least in theory. That doesn't work because the PE firms are looking around for the inefficiencies, and they'll find them. Not only do you end up buying the last company that competes with the first company, but some percentage of those companies in there you're probably not the best at. And so the PE firms go, oh, we'll take 4, 8, and 17. We'll buy them at this price. We'll, really focus them, get them away from these other things that slow them down, turn them into real businesses, and in some cases sell them back to the company they bought it from. But make it work, because at the end of the day, everything is unique. And there isn't much of an argument for just pure scale anymore. Oh, we're part of 3M, therefore, no, that doesn't matter. Is your adhesives business as strong as your abrasives business? If not, there might be a better company to put the adhesives business with, and let the abrasives one, flourish. So there's just so many efficiencies that technology and smart people and flexible capital can go after, such that you just really can't just tie a bunch of stuff together anymore. Again, the dumb scale argument is starting to lose.
We've got 2 minutes here, and that we had talked a little bit off of the podcast about IBM this week, and I did want to just bring it up here because we have a minute or two. That stock dropped 25%, its largest drop since Black Monday back in 1987 when we were wee children. It's very interesting because the market cannot decide. So basically, they came out and said that companies are spending on AI-related infrastructure ahead of scarcity and price increases that are to be expected, and that affected them buying any of IBM's consulting and hardware products. And stock dropped 25%. And I think the debate in the market is this a canary in the coal mine of some sort? And if so, what sort? And I'm curious where your head is on that.
Wow, there's so many dimensions to this story.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up. I don't think we can do it justice in 2 minutes, but what originally struck me about this story is, oh, wait a minute, whatever happened to Watson? Because you remember Watson was the very first kind of frontier AI model that was commercialized. Yep. And IBM was showing me, I mean, I was back at Forrester like 10 years ago, they were showing me whiz-bang stuff. I'm like, wow, this is going to change the world. And what happened? They're like the, you know, basic research companies that develop something like Xerox PARC, and somebody else goes out and makes money off of it. So they've become almost like basic research, but they're not a government institution, which is a bad combination.
Yet, by the way, Intel wasn't a government institution. So
that's true. We do own part of Intel now. Don't forget that. So I just think IBM is fundamentally flawed. I'm sure they do some things well. You know, there's something about just hanging in there long enough, but there's something wrong with the company that consistently misses the boat. And your story about AI is yet another one. They're doing some other stuff, and then the CEO comes out and says, "Yeah, we underestimated this, so we missed how to sell into this market." I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So you stop doing other stuff, you transition to this, you buy some companies, you bring in a new CEO, and yet it's the same old story. They continue to miss every opportunity. They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, it seems. And I think they're just lugging along. People have tried to buy them. People have thought about going private with them. It's just, I don't know, maybe there's just something inherently wrong with the company and they got to just blow it up and start all over again. But yeah, that's a big loss, 25%. And by the way, there's another side note to this. It was the lowest, it was the worst trading history day in 115 years. You mentioned Black Friday or Black Monday in 1987. You know what also happened in the last 115 years? I didn't bother to look into it, but wasn't the stock market crash in 1929?
That's true, yes.
So that's worse than that for them?
I guess the adding machine business was still really strong after that in 1929, and IBM was able to get through it. I think for me, the question that's so interesting is around, I think there was some feeling that, okay, the AI infrastructure spending was going to had been leveling off, where maybe we're over a hump, and then it would just be a maintenance phase. But it looks like, at least if we believe IBM, and that's if we believe IBM, then maybe we're still in the investment phase of AI. Maybe we're still in the early innings of this whole thing in a way that we didn't recognize. Or IBM is just a disaster, and this is a great excuse, and we're going to hear the same thing in 3 months.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the latter because there's enough evidence of that it seems to make sense. Well, I know we're out of time here, so just a quick final note. For those who don't know, we have our service called Nexus. It's kind of an offshoot of what we do at Master B2B. It's not the core part of our business, but we get getting asked questions from people around, can you help us with consulting projects? Do you know anybody who would be a good senior executive for the company? We've got questions and we're looking for experts. Well, we have a whole network of experts that we can connect you with to answer any of your business, technology, or software acquisition and hiring questions. So if that's of interest, do reach out to us. On that note, Jared, it's been a great 2 weeks. You get to go back behind the camera where you can just yell at us for being long, like we are again today. And we'll say
that was my fault. I will put away the one collared shirt that I own. And I guess I will see you and Brian when he's back next week.
Will do.